everyone. Welcome to the Sacred Self-Worth interview series. I'm Ilana Varro, and I'm here with Ashley Turner today, who is going to be talking to us about all different aspects of self-worth, body, mind, yoga, movement. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. You're a psychotherapist, yoga and meditation instructor, and you just do everything that I love and I'm intrigued by. So could you give us a little intro of who you are in your own words?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here and putting out this incredible summit and this great information and practices. I'm really honored.
Thanks.
Yeah, I live here excuse me, I live here in LA as well, and I've been teaching yoga for 18 years. And after I started teaching a few years into my practice, I realized that I really also wanted to help people take their yoga off the mat, so to speak, and really address the changes that they were seeking in their lives with relationships, with themselves, with self-love, finances, whatever it is. And that the yoga practice itself on the mat, of course, is so powerful and really is a great tool for emotional processing, awakening. But I didn't want to limit it to just teaching asana on the mat. So I went back to school. I got my master's and became licensed as a psychotherapist. And so my work really focuses on this fusion of yoga, meditation, and the tools of psychotherapy, the tools of, everything that we're learning now about neuroscience, about behavioral shifts, social emotional learning, and weaving those together. So I have a training that I lead called Yoga, Psyche, Soul. And the psychology, the psychotherapy that I practice is very much based on depth psychology. And depth psychology is embracing the unconscious, really doing our inner work, what I call shadow work, and owning that piece. So that's a big focus of my Yoga, Psyche, Soul training. And then I also have another online training called Urban Priestess, and that's a year-long mystery school for women that I co-founded with Sienna Sherman, and that's incredible. And that's we also really hinge our material on shadow work, but in the way of feminine empowerment and moving through the entire wheel of the zodiac. We go through that for the entire year and look at 13 major archetypes that we embody as women, so the 12 archetypes of the zodiac, and then the priestess as well. So those are my two big, programs that I am really devoted to, and just so, happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What is, shadow work just kind of struck a chord for me of how does shadow work relate to self-worth? And what is your definition of self-worth through your knowledge and your training?
Well, first of all, self-love, self-worth is really, how do we practice? How do we really fall in love with ourselves? And that requires consistent, for most of us, most of us are really walking around with some version of I'm not good enough. And for most of us, that version of I'm not good enough can start to, lead the way and be the voice that can take over. And you can call it the voice of the ego, or maybe you are aware of perhaps a childhood trauma or some incident in your life that really initiated that. And then on top of that, of course, we have, our social conditioning, which is so at the forefront now. We're really, I feel like, reaching this tipping point where it's out. Like the secret's out, time's up. The Me Too campaign, women have reached the threshold. I really hope, we've had enough of this whole playing small, nobody talking about logical reality that we've been living in for actually thousands of years. And so we have all this conditioning that is laid down in the template of our consciousness. And depth psychology, it would be called the collective unconscious. That from the collective unconscious, we really are facing an uphill battle with body image. We really are facing an uphill battle of self-worth when women are getting paid, 70 cents on the dollar to men, when women's bodies are so objectified and hyper critiqued. and we internalize that. And so, the shadow work aspect is to take 100% responsibility for your life, and that there is no other. It's never out there. And so we have to look inside and say, where does that patriarchy live in me? Where does that, you know, live in me? Where that objectifying that's hypercritical live in me? And so how can we, as women, anyone, eradicate that, heal that part of ourselves, that voice within us that is insecure? And it's natural to have fear, and it's natural to have insecurities. We can normalize that. There's nothing wrong with it. The question is, how do we change our relationship to that so that it's not running the show? And so the shadow work piece is really getting clear and doing specific practices to begin to unwind, to understand, and then to heal that voice within us.
Awesome. Is there a light side to the shadow side? Like, is there the duality? Is that part of it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the shadow implies that there's a light. So the shadow, when you think of, one way I like to think of it in a Jungian psychological definition, is that the shadow is any part of our consciousness that we can't quite see. It's unconscious. And one of my favorite quotes from Carl Jung is, the thing about the unconscious is that it's unconscious. So it's so simple. It's such a simple concept, but it's like most of the time we don't even realize what we're playing out. We're not aware, or we might have an inkling, but we might not really see. And, how do we start to see that? Usually in relationship, or, we always hear the term, people in our relationships are a reflection of us.
Yeah.
And, for example, I have an identical twin sister, and yeah, and it's amazing. And she's amazing. And she was here this last weekend visiting me, and, she sat down and we got into an argument, and she just said, you're so like this, you're so like that. And I was just sitting there thinking, wow, I don't even see that. Like, it doesn't even register. And I feel like I'm fairly self-aware, So there's always these patterns or tendencies that we have that we just may not be as aware of how they're being read with other people or coming across. And so relationships are a great way to see that. There's many ways to start looking at it. Working with a therapist, of course, is a great way. But the bottom line is, one very simple way of identifying your shadow is, what is it in other people that trigger you? What is a quality or an aspect of someone else that pisses you off, that irritates you, that you tend to gossip about or not like in another person? And then we have to ask ourselves, where does that quality live within me? So, I could take someone like, Donald Trump, and say, okay, he's a bully, he's a misogynist, he's, greedy, he, whatever, righteous, narcissistic. And then I would have to look at that and say, where am I a bully? Really, where am I a bully? Where maybe I'm bullying myself, maybe I'm inside my own head. I definitely have that bullying voice that's like, you're not good enough, you're this, you're that. Or where am I greedy? Where am I narcissistic? Where am I righteous? Where am I a misogynist? Where do I, again, maybe it's towards myself. That's a lot of these aspects tend to be internalized. And that's where the lack of self-love or self-compassion can really start, festering inside, because it's actually being circled back to us. And a lot of those voices, when we internalize them, whether it was a punitive parent or maybe a coach or a teacher or, a bully or someone at some time where, you heard these voices or these phrases, when we internalize them, they typically start to spin inward. And sometimes we act it out and we might say that to someone else. But for most of us, the biggest battles that we face are in our own head.
Yeah. What have you found is a great way to start this practice of self-compassion, self-love, practicing self-worth?
Yeah,
it's foreign.
Yeah, it's such a great question. And there's a few things. I mean, first of all, self-love, For me, love is a noun, of course, but more importantly, love is a verb. And so how do we actually show our love? What do we do? And of course, I'm sure many of you watching have heard of the 5 languages of love, and whether it's physical affection or spending quality time with someone, giving them gifts, verbal affirmation is really important. And then one is, and so we tend to be oriented towards 1 or 2 of those languages of love. And then the question is, how do you show that to yourself? So do you actually take yourself out on dates? Do you actually spend quality time with yourself like you would want from a partner? Do you buy yourself, precious gifts? It doesn't have to be expensive, but maybe getting a manicure, pedicure, getting a massage, what are the acts of service? How are you really in service to yourself? How does love act with you? I worked with a great therapist, and she would always say, it's never about them. It's always you. It's you and you. Mm-hmm. So we think of this vertical axis of you being, I think of it like sitting in your throne or being in your full power, being in your confidence. Or terminology works for you in your highest, most empowered self, you connecting to spirit, you connecting to the soul. Mm-hmm. And then you, the human, the individual, the ego, the fear, the inner child. So we're always healing this relationship between that individual sort of human flawed self and then this infinite spiritual soul. And so healing that relationship. So if you think of, like inner child work is a great thing to do. Yeah. And I have on my altar a picture of me when I was 6 years old, and I just moved. And so I was finding some other childhood photos and pulling some of those photos out and really sitting with that inner 6-year-old, sitting with that inner 7-year-old. And how would you talk to, a young child, or if you have a child or a niece or nephew, how do you speak to them? What are the positive affirmations that you give to them? How do you want to protect them? How do you want to take care of them? If you have a child or you're babysitting or taking care of a child, you're always thinking ahead. What are they going to need? When do they need to eat? When do they need to sleep? Like really treating ourselves with that kind of loving kindness. And so that's one way of doing some inner child work, and really healing that relationship of you and you, asking, what does this child need? If you know that you're in a situation and you get triggered, having actually a dialogue with that inner child of, what do you need right now? What do you have a message for me? Is there something that you want to say about this situation? So that's one piece of the inner child work. And then the other piece that I find really helpful for integrating shadow, which I would say, is really in terms of self-love, what you're talking about from the yogic perspective is the 3rd chakra. The 3rd chakra is our power center, our belly center, our sense of self, our sense of confidence, self-trust, self-love, of course, self-discipline. All of these spawn from having a core of love. And the opposite of that, the shadow of that, is shame, and being ashamed of whatever, fill in the blank. I'm not thin enough. I'm not rich enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I don't have enough money, whatever it is. I don't have a great family. So whatever you're ashamed of, whatever that shame piece is, that's a really important thing to get to know. And the aim is to move from judgment to understanding. Mm-hmm. So we're not judging ourselves for having that, but we begin to understand, where does the shame, come from? What's the root of that? And even more important than understanding it is beginning to heal that and just simply take different actions. So for me, one of the greatest tools that I learned from my teacher and therapist, Mona Miller, many years ago, was doing shadow work is writing a letter. And so one way to do this is, let's say you get in an argument with someone, if this unconscious shadow material tends to show up as how we get irritated, frustrated, judge someone else. As soon as you see yourself going into that trigger, judge, anger, irritability, start writing, dear so-and-so. So let's say it's your boyfriend. Dear so-and-so, you know, when I look at you, I see. When I look at you, I feel. You act like, and you remind me of. And then or you could write what's called a fuck you letter, which I use a lot with my clients. And you're writing it out to that person, like, F you for doing this, F you for doing that, you know, F you for, it's really good when you get in a fight. It's really good to vent those feelings out. And then what you do, that's only the first half of it. So you vomit it all out. You dump it all out on the page, just stream of consciousness writing until it's totally done. And then you go back, you can read it out loud. But the second piece is you go back and you cross out their name and you put in your name. And so like I gave you the example with, you know, me with Trump, you know, dear so-and-so, you know, fuck you for being this and such a bully and saying such a nasty thing and, you know, being so greedy. And I can't believe you said this to me. And I can't believe you just walked out the door and abandoned me and all these things. So whatever it is that happened, you write your name in there and then you read it back aloud and you switch out all the pronouns and you would know, how F you for this, you know, for being such a bully. And then you would sit with that and say, okay, same. How am I a bully? You know, fuck you for abandoning me. You know, maybe you had something with a parent or an ex-lover or betraying me. And then you have to look at how are you betraying yourself or how are you abandoning yourself? And oftentimes it may not be, obviously it may not be a direct correlation, like you left your kids in childhood or something, but where are you abandoning yourself now?
What's an example of abandoning yourself?
Well, where are you not showing up for yourself? Are you not exercising? Are you abandoning your dream? Are you abandoning a truth that you know about yourself? Like, it's time for this relationship to end, and you keep abandoning that little child that's like, hey, wait a second, for me, I really want to move cross country, or I don't like living here, or, whatever the truth is. Abandoning yourself can be, smoking cigarettes, like any kind of, detrimental behavior, of course, is like abandoning that little child. Like, if you think about that inner child, if we go back to the analogy of it's about you and you, loving that inner child unconditionally, what do they need? That child saying, like, I don't want to go there. Like, I don't, I'm tired. I need to take you're not going to force that child to, like, do something, that they don't want to do, or you're just not going to not feed them for, a day or two because you don't feel like it, but we do that with ourselves all the time. We don't go to yoga. We don't work out. We don't drink enough water. We stay in relationships that are actually damaging. Stay in a job that's actually a boss that's a bully or mean, or, whatever it is on the spectrum. Money is a big one too. Money and food are, big ones. Money and food and the body. So those are two places where it tends to show up.
Yeah. And I find that for most people, it's easy to conceptualize the child self and to find compassion for that child. But I've also come across experiences where even picturing a small, innocent child it's tough to find compassion, or they feel like they deserve, the punishment and, the things that happen to them in life. Or how do you work with that when there isn't a sense of innate worthiness?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. I feel that it's very important, and a lot of my work really hinges on cultivating a spiritual relationship. So connecting with your version of God, goddess, spirit, and cultivating that, whether it's going to church, LA, we have agape, going to synagogue. Maybe it's not an organized religion. Maybe it's you meditating every day and really just sitting. And guarantee, like, if you start to sit with yourself 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes a day, what that would indicate to me, if there's no compassion and there's no sense of inherent worthiness, is that it's buried under a lot of pain. It's buried under a lot of defense. The defenses are up, and so they've lost that connection. I mean, to the heart.
Yeah.
I look a lot through the chakra system in my work. So the heart, that would be a deficiency in the heart chakra, where there's absolutely no connection to a feeling of love. And one thing's for sure, if you can't connect to love towards your own self, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to connect to love towards another, to truly feel and cherish someone else if you aren't allowing that. So what you're saying is you're not allowing yourself to receive love, to feel loved. I am loved. I am lovable. I am love.
Yeah.
I am loving.
Yeah.
So that would be a deficiency in the heart chakra. And what's important for that is to start opening that up and finding ways of opening that and cultivating compassion and cultivating love. So some of the best ways, two very practical ways of sort of tending to the heart or strengthening the heart, healing the heart, are playing with children and playing with dogs or any animals. I'd say dogs because my sister's dog was just here, but any pets, any animals. I really fell in love with this dog. He's so beautiful, German Shepherd. But animals and kids, finding that innocence, playing with that, being in the presence of that sweetness, the innocence, the unconditionality that kids and animals have, and starting to exercise that within yourself. So those are two really good ways to start healing that. If there's such a block to even feeling, as you said, like a core worthiness or core love.
Yeah, that's a great point. I forgot about the animal factor.
Yeah. Animals are really, that's why they're so therapeutic.
Yeah, I agree. What do you see shifts in your clients, in your own life, when you're aligned to a sense of self-worth and you treat yourself from a place of cherishing, respecting, honoring? What shifts outside of you?
Well, I think one thing that really shows up for me is an increased self-discipline. That discipline and trust, building trust in yourself. Like any relationship, you want to know that you can trust that person. And what that means is that they show up for you, they do what they say they're going to do in the time that they say they're going to do it consistently. May not be perfect every time, but the majority of the time, you can rely on them, right? Uh-huh. So we have to know that we can rely on ourselves. Like a child and a parent, like two lovers. If that parent consistently doesn't meet the child's needs and doesn't follow through on what they say they're going to do, then the child loses faith and they don't trust that parent. And then it's very difficult for them to trust anything, anyone in life. Yeah. And so the same is true within our own, you and you relationship. So if you're not consistently showing up for yourself, if you don't, on an unconscious level, and maybe on a conscious level if you're aware of it, but many of us aren't, there's a lack of self-trust. And so it begins to erode one's sense of self and one's sense of confidence. So in other words, if you say you're going to do something for yourself, like you say, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times this week, or I'm going to go to yoga twice, or I'm going to call this person and start to generate some new clientele. And then you just don't do it. On the unconscious level, your unconscious begins to mistrust who's running the show, right? So when we show up for ourselves, we are more likely, A, to show up for ourselves again. We're building that habit. But B, we also start to build self-confidence. And so the key to breaking through shame or building self-trust, and as I said, with love, is action. And taking doesn't, you don't have to run around and be like manic in action, but how are you actively loving yourself? How are you actively showing up for yourself? Maybe it's meeting friends and moving through, sense of loneliness or isolation, and making plans, making social plans, showing up for yourself, cultivating friendships, building your community support, whatever that is. So the action of showing up for yourself, and then how that correlates with self-discipline, it means that there are going to be times where what, I don't really ever like to use the word should, but like, this would be the most beneficial thing, but you also kind of don't feel like going to the gym, or you want to have that second or third glass of wine, and the discipline is to say, I love myself and I'm adhering to these values and this goal that I have. I know that if I have another drink, I'm not going to wake up until later in the morning. My whole day is not going to be as productive, or, whatever that example would be for you. And so having some discipline to say, I value myself. I value my goals, my aims, my dreams, and I'm going to take these actions that support that. And, it's the 80-20 rule. You don't have to do it perfectly all the time, but the majority of the time, 80% of the time, you're pretty locked and loaded, and you're on it. And that builds confidence and it builds self-trust.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. I've noticed that when people are kind of struggling with self-worth, that perfectionism also kind of pops up. Comparison, judgment, perfectionism. And as you were just saying, the 80-20 rule, what kind of tips do you have for people that notice that they're in judgment, in comparison, in perfectionism, maybe paralyzed by perfectionism from taking any action?
Yeah. Perfectionism is the same. I mean, it kind of correlates with anxiety. And again, the key to that is to take some action, like just to move forward. And there is, one of my favorite quotes ever, but this is from the Tao Te Ching. And I think it's the Shloka 42, passage 42. And it's true perfection seems imperfect, yet it is perfectly itself. True straightness seems crooked. True art seems artless. So it's the paradox of, first of all, in nature, there actually is no such thing as perfection. There is no such thing as symmetry in nature. So as much as our mind might try to grasp a version of reality that we think we want and we're attached to, that kind of symmetry and, it doesn't exist. And what exists is every tree looking totally different, every flower looking totally different. Everyone has their own particular brand of magic. And we really have to, grok that. We really have to get that. Like, no, if someone else is doing even a business or even launching a course that looks very similar to yours, it doesn't matter, because spirit, consciousness, Shakti is pouring through you and your perfect prism, your constitution, your life experience, your stories, who you are, your gifts, your talents, and it's going to come through in a different way than it is for someone else. So comparison, as my priestess Ariel Spilsbury says, comparison is the thief of joy. And we really, where the discipline comes in. Like, it is discipline to turn our mind around. Like, it's a discipline to get on the treadmill or go to spinning class. It's not always easy. It's very rarely easy to turn your mind around and say, okay, I see that. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to indulge that thought. I'm going to turn the bus around. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to focus on my side of the street. All you can ever control is your side of the street, and you show up and do your best. And that's it. There's nothing else to do.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite practices in shifting and turning around? Because like you said, it's more often difficult. I don't feel like it comes up, or, oh, it's too hard, or I'm tired.
I think it's really important to cultivate, in meditation, what's called the role of the witness, and to begin to understand that we have different voices in our heads. And I think of it like you're sitting at like a huge conference table, and it's a board of directors meeting, right? And you have the CEO, you're the CEO, and then you have the CEO would be like that vertical highest sense of self, soul, most empowered bodhisattva, Buddha nature, high priestess, again, whatever image might work for you, your spirit. And then you have the head of HR, and you have the CFO, and you have the head of marketing, and the head of sales, and all of these different departments. And so everyone is sitting at this board of directors table, and everybody is coming to it with their perspective. So marketing's looking out for the marketing department. HR wants this, and sales is focusing on this, and you as the CEO are sitting there, and you listen to everyone, and you hear everyone's solution to the problem, and then you make the educated decision based on the data at hand, right? And so in our own heads, we have all these different voices. These are the different archetypes. We have the inner child. Most of us have a punitive parent, some version of that sort of bullying, like pushy, maybe not good enough, that voice. We might have a voice of the great mother, someone that's very compassionate, that's very loving, that's nurturing. We usually have a teenager that's a little rebellious, that's like, fuck that, I don't want to do that, So all these different voices, and everybody has a different agenda. But you cultivate the role of the witness, where you can start to identify which voice is actually talking right now, and is this the wisest choice? It's just because we think a thought doesn't mean it's true, right? Yeah. And so we want to create space between the thought arising and the action or the response that we have to that thought. And we don't have to respond to a thought. We can just let it float, pass away like a cloud in the sky. So when we have those moments where it's a moment of choice, it's a precipice, you're talking about turning the bus around and really shifting it. The first step is always awareness, noticing. Oh, there's that rebellious teenager that doesn't want to go to the gym. It's like, fuck that. I want to lay around. I want to watch the Olympics. I want to do whatever, have a glass of wine and watch a movie. And then the wise one can come in and say, no, you know what? Or the inner child can say, you know what? I really, So we learn to listen to different voices, and ultimately more and more regularly come from that place of empowerment, wisdom, choose wisely. So, but the spaciousness is important. This is where meditation comes in, so that you start to really get to know what are the voices in your head, what are the imprints, the patterns, the thought constructs that are influencing you, because we all have slightly different software downloads, and sometimes we have to get an upgrade. We really need to upgrade that software. And so it's the spaciousness, the meditation, choosing, which voice is at play. And then if it's really challenging and you feel like you're really not making progress, obviously, I'm a huge advocate of therapy.
Yeah.
So sometimes that unconsciousness and the knots that we have, where we get really triggered and really sort of locked in a thought pattern, spinning in our own thought pattern, that unconscious knot, in yoga, it's called the grundhi. And sometimes, we really need support. And so going to a therapist is really helpful, because they can start to help you unwind and get clear about maybe the origin of that, and certainly help you build some skills to get to the other side.
Got it. And do you think that it's a good idea, like in the CEO kind of model that you were talking about, to have goals, to have plans, to have an intention? Like, does the CEO know where they're trying to get to? Like, do you believe in goal setting or that kind of stuff?
That's a great question. That's such a great question. I've been sort of in this dialogue with my man, because he really feels like, I could never imagine what spirit wants to bring me. And I'm really just staying open, doing my best, showing up, and allowing spirit to continue to amaze me in my life. And I agree with that. And I also think I definitely think goals are helpful. It certainly helps me organize my day and my time and aim for things. I'm not, super hardcore, only focus on my goals, goal oriented, but I think it's good to have some sense of direction and certain, sort of markers that, you want to hit or you want to aim for, and a vision, but of course, to not be too attached to that, because we're living in the great mystery, and
Yeah.
very rarely, if ever, is anything on our timeline. And so really being open to the soulfulness of life. And that's the feminine, it's just being in the flow of that with some structure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny. It's like duality once again, right? Have goals, but don't be attached to them. Be aware of your shadow and focus on the light.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. That's very cool. What are some of your favorite practices? I know you have a gift to share with the audience, and I think that ties into this, but what are some of your favorite practices aside from meditation, connecting to your self-worth, working on improving that?
Yeah, I really believe so strongly in the mind-body connection. My work is entirely based on that. And so I think that, in the name of taking action, and love is a verb, and everything that we've been talking about, as I mentioned, our sense of self and self-worth actually is centered in the third chakra, which is the belly center. I'm not pointing at it, but I'll just, it's right here. So it's like right between the sternum and the navel. About halfway between the navel and the sternum is what's in Chinese medicine. It's called the hara also, but in yoga, it's the third chakra, it's Manipura. And so there are very specific practices that we can do to strengthen our core. So it's strengthening, literally doing core work, whether it's Pilates, applied abdominals, classic sort of gym type ab work. Those are all great. In yoga, twisting is really good. Kundalini yoga has some kriyas that are great for twisting and really sort of wringing out the whole digestive tract. So anything having to do with core work. And then the second piece of that is cardio. So the element associated with Manipura is fire. And so you want to light your inner fire. You want to activate it. One of the aspects or attributes of having a strong Manipura, being empowered, is that we don't take ourselves too seriously. There's a natural lightness. The two qualities of fire, the fire element, are heat and light. And so if you think of that metaphorically, I want to fire up, I'm activated, I'm moving towards my goals, I take action that is directly aligned with my goals. I'm poised to get up and take action, but I'm not manically running around like obsessed, goal oriented. That's too much fire. That's a fire that's out of control that can singe. But your fire is stoked, it's healthy, it's burning. And then the second quality is light. So there's a natural lightness with people that are empowered, are living their truth. They don't take themselves too seriously. They can laugh at themselves, not necessarily in like a constant self-depreciation, but we see the lightness of things. We're not taking it on so heavy. And so building the heat in core work and also in cardio are really helpful to tone and strengthen Manipura. So running, spinning, hiking, but really getting your heart rate up is very important. So those two, and we know, nobody ever felt worse after a workout. Nobody ever felt worse, after a yoga class. You see those memes on Instagram, and it's true. So like worst case scenario, if you're really down on yourself or you're really feeling locked in like low self-esteem, go exercise, go work out. That's like, if you take one thing from this, I would offer you that, take a brisk walk around the neighborhood, go to a spin class, go for a jog, go to Pilates, something that's going to support you in stoking that inner fire.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to, add a little piece to that, because a lot of, the people that I work with have, disordered eating or relationships to exercise that might not be, the most healthy. Yeah. So keep that in mind too,
Yeah.
like this is,
Yeah.
this is speaking from the perspective of if you don't have actively disordered eating or overexercise and that kind of stuff,
For
because
sure.
that, like you just said, is too
That's the
much.
shadow of it. Yeah, that would be too much. So, but in that case, just that. So then you want to temper the fire. You want to tone it down. So for that, it might be, a slow flow yoga class or
Yeah.
restorative yoga or something that's really going to be very nurturing and very tender towards yourself.
Yeah.
So, you want to look at that metaphor of fire, and do you need to ramp it up? Are you sort of locked in like a depression and where you need to activate the fire, a lethargy, or are you already too active and you need to tone it down and be gentle, maybe get a massage or body work or something like that?
Yeah. Awesome.
Mhm.
And how can people find you? What's your website, social media?
Yeah, thank you. My website is ashleyturner.co, ashleyturner.co. And then I also, for my yoga psychology program, and you'll find everything on that website, so you can get to everything from there. But my program, Yoga Psyche Soul, which we do a full module 1, is really focused on shadow work and the foundations of everything we've been talking about today, like getting into the nuts and bolts and these practices so you have a toolbox. Also infused with Yoga Psyche Soul. So that there's 2 modules in Venice in May, the foundations, and then a full chakra immersion. So if the chakras are interesting to you, that's also happening in May. And then there's 4 modules in the fall. I have a meditation teacher training, meditation, mindfulness, and neuroscience, and then a whole course on sound, mantra, chanting, how that heals, and that's really beautiful. And then conscious relationships, sacred sexuality, that's module 5. And then the last module is a business and leadership training. So that you can also find on my website or go to yoga-psychology.co. So it's yoga-psychology.co. Yeah.
Awesome. And just from a personal kind of addition, again, I highly recommend everyone tuning in to sign up for Ashley's newsletter, because you offer so much free, flow. The last one I recall is like yoga for depression, and very tailored, different kind of unique, just really great free information. So why not?
Yeah, thank you. I do a ton of Facebook Lives. I do a ton of free webinars, and really love to connect with everyone. And so, find me on Facebook, Instagram. It's Ashley Turner 1. I always get in on these, every single platform. I'm like, the Ashley Turner's already gone. So I'm just Ashley Turner 1 on everything.
You're number 1.
Hilarious. But anyway, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. And so reach out and give me some comments. Tell me what you guys want to learn about. And I'm so happy to answer your questions for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley, for your time. I really appreciate it. I've been a fan of your work for a while now, and it's just such a pleasure to connect with you and have you share on this topic. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for putting this together, and thank you all for tuning in. And I'm just so grateful to be a part of your community. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Bye.